was the latest live-action Disney remake to enter the fold of the live-action obsessed pop culture of today. If there's one good thing to come out of this pandemic, it's that Mulan couldn't go to theaters, where it would make a lot of Disney money, presumably, and prove that these remakes are still successful. I mean, they still put it on Disney Plus, and they still got a bunch more Disney remakes coming out, and sequels and prequels to these other ones. One battle at a time, though. We still consider this a win, even if by COVID default. And this movie is about the story of Mulan. You know what this is. You know the plot, except this time it's very serious. No fun and no musical numbers. No Mushu, no cricket sidekick. It's a very, very serious Chinese war movie. Give us your $30 on Disney Plus Premium, or wait till now, which is what I did. That's why this review isn't out in September. I was too busy watching the best movie of the year that day instead of paying $30 for this. I was never really all that excited for this movie, even when the trailers were starting to come out and it was promising something different, which is, at least better compared to the other Disney remakes like The Lion King, where they just go through the plot beat for beat, and, maybe there's a new scene that wasn't in the animation there that just pads the runtime out a bit, but overall doesn't really affect the plot. But it's pretty much just beat for beat the same movie. So I can commend them at least for not doing that with this movie and trying to be something different, but I always just had it in my mind, if this is trying to be a serious war movie, the only way you can get a lot out of it is if this isn't made by Disney, because Disney has to cut out war blood. They have to cut around a lot of intense action like this, so I'm not sure how they're gonna do it. Let's see. Those Pirates of the Caribbean movies got away with a lot with a PG-13 rating under the Disney banner, but it's been a long time since then. And of course, it didn't help that this movie was surrounded in a lot of controversy. The main actress playing Mulan just outright said, "I support the Hong Kong police brutality going on right now." Some statements that came out from creatives behind the movie, they explaining how they removed the original commanding officer in the animation because of the Me Too movement, only for that to backfire on them because people actually looked to that character as an LGBTQ+ icon, because he was kind of maybe falling in love with Mulan when she was pretending to be a man, so he's at least bisexual. And they were not expecting that. There's also the fact that they shot this movie around some internment camps, some Chinese internment camps, and then thanked that government in the credits of this movie that supported those internment camps. And of course, Mushu not being in it. That's probably the biggest controversy out of all of those, is just that the funny dragon is not in the movie. So when they put this on Disney Plus for $30, I did not pay for it. I did not want to support it. Not just because of the controversies, but also I don't want to support the remakes. I'll watch it for free, I guess, but I'm not gonna pay $30 for it, because that's $30. A lot of the movies that came to VOD only cost like $20, $19.99, something like that. $29.99? Nah. And I wanted to address this really quickly, a lot of the main takeaways. Back when this movie was supposed to come out in March, they already had some Twitter reactions, some critics that had seen it and were paid by Disney. I mean, they just wanted to tweet about how good it was. They were like, "You will not miss the songs," which, first off, that's a goddamn lie. And then they also started talking about how this is some really fantastic action, and this director, Nicky Caro, should go on to make a female-led Marvel movie or Star Wars movie because the action is just, it's so good. That's also a goddamn lie. The way this movie is shot for a lot of the action is high frame rate. They up the frame rate up so they can kind of choose which shots they want to slow down for slow-mo later on in the editing process, which if you're going to do a slow-mo shot, that is how you do it. There's no way to go around it. You have to shoot at a higher frame rate and then slow that down. But if you're not going to use certain shots, you should just shoot it normally, because the highly frenetic kind of style a lot of this movie has is so distracting. I feel like production meetings are for moments like this, where you put out the storyboards, the little drawings, okay, this shot, this shot, this shot, this shot. This part will be slow-mo, so these will all be normal. This shot's gonna be slow-mo, so let's highlight that or mark it down or something. But I guess not. They were just just shoot the whole thing like that. Why not? And also, it does not help that this movie, like I said before, is edited to shit. They're cutting around any kind of violence. Like, the closest we get to like any actual war violence is that you see some arrows hit some people. There's a lot of times where they cut around stuff and it just looks like these Mongols are just knocking people down and just throwing stuff around. It's hard to really get a grasp of like what's actually going on in these action sequences because everything is just so lame and it's so poorly done. There's a couple things visually that look like the Phoenix looks alright. The Phoenix that flies around, that's her guide, that's their replacement for Mushu, is just some Phoenix that flies around and doesn't speak and nothing. That's like the most like visually consistent thing, I guess. And there's a couple times where they showed the evil sorceress villain do some things. It's like, okay, that's kind of cool. It's not enough, but it looked alright what she did. A lot of the visual effects, though, are distracting. You can tell they're like in front of a green screen, and there's a scene in the beginning of the movie where the young Mulan is like running around and showing off, oh, she's not like the other girls, literally, and she's like running around this green screen environment doing some like jump downs and like these sweet moves, and it looks so bad. Even if it wasn't a child, even if they had to put in the older Mulan in something like that, it still would have looked bad because it looks bad throughout the rest of the movie whenever they try to do stuff like her jumping off a horse, doing a backflip, and kicking like a spear, and then kicking that same spear back to like a bad guy. Or near the end of the movie where someone literally just like throws an arrow and then she just does like another like backflip and kicks it down somewhere else. It's like, ugh. We'll get more into why she's able to do that a little later, but it looks awful. There's never a moment where you're convinced that that's actually happening or even possible. You can do some insane stuff in some action movies, but if in the visual language of the movie it seems pretty consistent, I can forgive it. You know, like the Fast and the Furious movies do a lot of ridiculous stuff, but in the visual language of those films, it's like, okay, I can forgive it. Why not? It's a dumb fun action movie. With this, they're trying to be so serious, and they're still doing these ridiculous things with poor editing too to accompany it. It doesn't work. It's one of those things where you can tell they're trying to emulate a certain style of filmmaking, like they're trying to do like a Chinese action movie. But this movie is written by white people and mostly produced by white people and directed by a white woman. And they clearly have no idea how to perfectly emulate that style. Nikki Caro, I'm sure her other movies are great. I haven't seen them. There might have been some action in The Zookeeper's Wife because that's World War II. I don't know. I haven't seen it. But you can tell she's inexperienced. The people saying, like, the action is so great, I'm sorry. They're awful at their worst, and at its best, it's just amateur. You know, I feel like anyone could have stepped in to do it. And I'm not trying to start up the argument of only, like, in this instance, Chinese people should direct a movie about Mulan, or any Chinese people, although I do think that is a fair thing to go by. I know some people look at just talent. You should just hire the most talented person for the job. In this case, they did not. And maybe a Chinese person or a Chinese film director who's more experienced with making action movies in this style would have fitted much better. Maybe if this movie wasn't trying to emulate that kind of style of action, it would have turned out better. But still, what also bogs this movie down is the acting. There's only one actor in this movie who I thought did a good job, and that is the guy playing Mulan's father. Zama, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. He's the only one who actually has a form of a beating heart in this movie and gives a performance that is more sweet, and almost even convinced me at one point that they had something good going. Everyone else in this movie is either bad or they're just kind of like whatever. Jet Li plays the Emperor, and I'm not sure what it was, but he seemed dubbed, and I don't know if he actually was or not, and if he wasn't, fine. But it seemed like he was saying lines with a certain kind of inflection or emotion, but it seemed like his mouth, like the way he was moving his mouth was just, it didn't support the emotion in his voice. And he's just so, like stone-faced the whole time, pretty much. I couldn't believe it. I don't know if he was dubbed or not. I can't figure it out. Donnie Yen, he plays the new commanding officer, not the one from the animation. You know, this is a different one. And, you know, he's fine. He apparently knew Mulan's dad. Not enough to know that he doesn't have a son, especially when he says it to the people that come by, like, hey, where's the guy in your family? He's like, I'm blessed with daughters. I will go. And I guess they just don't notice later, like, oh, I'm his son, and they're like, oh, that checks out. I forget if that's a thing in the animated movie, too. I should probably go back and check that out again. The idea itself isn't that bad. Like, I knew your dad from like a long time ago when we fought. I got a lot of respect, or I see a lot of potential in you that you're not matching, and maybe there's like an admiration thing as it goes on. But it's just kind of like, he's just kind of there, and they hit the beats that they're supposed to, but without any real urgency or emotional value. Whatever. The rest of the supporting cast, like her friends, they're just kind of there. One of them is named Cricket. In the original, there's an animal sidekick named Cricket. It's a cricket. And in this movie, you have a new nerdy kind of soldier guy who is a little overweight and is named Cricket. He's a goofball, he's a nerd, and might not be the best suit for an army. And I guess they wanted a lot of comedic mileage out of that, and unfortunately, this movie just isn't funny. Anytime they try to be humorous, it falls completely flat. The new love interest, who's not the commanding officer and who's another soldier, just, I did not buy any kind of connection they had at all. Like, he was picking on the nerd, and she like, hey, stop doing that, I'm gonna stab you with my sword. They had a little brief thing, and then they fought in a training thing, and then you just have the river scene where he's like, hey, let's have like a couple lines of dialogue about how we should, like, I don't know, get to know each other, or don't turn your back on us and you should accept it. I don't know. If I'm being honest, I was slowly forgetting about what happened and what people were saying in the movie while the movie was going on. It's really boring. And I think the prime example of what I'm talking about is this river scene. In the animation, obviously she's pretending to be a dude to be in the army. And then a bunch of her friends come in like, hey, get over here, let's wrestle. And it's like, oh, I have boobs, they're gonna find out, and I'm naked in this pond. How do we get out of this? There's suspense in that scene because you don't want her to be found out, but there's humor in it too, because not only do you have Mushu helping her out, but you know, these characters are funny, the voice actors are selling it, the animation on their faces, like you feel the suspense, you feel the comedy. In this movie, the river scene is just, she goes in to bathe, and then just one dude comes up, and she's facing away from him the whole time, and then they just have like a dramatic scene. There's no suspense, no comedy, just, it's all flat. I can commend Disney all I want for trying to do something different with this remake, like I said before, but at the end of the day, if what you're going to do different falls completely flat in comparison to a highly superior version back in the 90s, then what's the point? What's the point of spending $200 million on something so dull and so lifeless? I'm not saying that you needed as a lot of people like to put it, like a sassy talking sidekick character, because I know that's a trope that some people have a problem with or they're just kind of over with nowadays, but I could have used some comedy during this. I would have loved to see a new Mushu, or Mushu played by Eddie Murphy once again, whatever they wanted to do, because that could have helped. Some kind of life, some kind of charm, some kind of humor could have helped this dull, bland, boring movie. At the end of the day, it's just boring. The main actress playing Mulan, I'm sorry to say, but she's awful in this movie, and I swear I'm not saying that just because she supported police brutality. She's just really bad. The first line of dialogue she says in this movie, I was like, ooh. Like the kid version of her had more charm to her, but we gotta get her out. We have the older Mulan now, and she's just so bland. You never once believe that she's supposed to be this special person, this amazing new soldier. She's just going through the motions. She's so dull. And it doesn't help that they introduce a new story beat where, in the animation, Mulan is special just because she's Mulan. You know, so like that's just it. And this one, it's, well, she's special because she has the force. I mean, and she can use it unlike these other women, and it makes her stronger than all the men, but if other people find out about it, she'll be cast out as a witch, which is, you know, a parallel between our new sorceress villain. So hey, drama there, keep that shit hidden, but oh no, you gotta go to war. Like, you've completely missed the point of the animated film, and in trying to do something different, you've instead created something inferior and not as special or empowering. The sorcerer's villain definitely could have been something interesting. Like, I like the idea of that subplot, like the parallels they introduce, but it's just so quick. The villains in this are awful. If their scenes aren't them involved in an action scene, a poorly done action scene, then a lot of it is just them stating the obvious, having really bad lines of dialogue, and not having the best performances either. And this parallel between Mulan and the sorceress chick, that could have been interesting if the acting was much better and if the storytelling actually had a drive and actually had a purpose. This parallel is coming in way too late. You have not developed this villain enough to earn whatever conversation they're trying to have. The villain in the original Mulan, if I had to have a problem with that movie, is that aside from the voice acting being good for that character and the animation looking good, there's not a whole lot to him as far as like a more three-dimensional character. It's just very like, he wants revenge and he's gonna get it. And that's about it as far as the story goes with that, but I prefer that villain much more than these two. That villain at least served his purpose at the end of the day, even if they didn't get a whole lot of mileage out of him. These two, whatever the director and writers were trying to do with them, they fell flat on their face doing it. There's even a moment like at the end of that conversation, the witch like throws a dagger at Mulan and she hits it, and while she's going backwards, like straight backwards, she then does a flip in the next shot and hits a rock. Like, okay, where's a pen? Like, she gets hit, right? And then boom, and then they cut and she's doing this and she hits a rock. That's what I mean. Like, really? Is that what you're doing? And then it turns out, like, even though a lot of this movie's theme is embrace who you are, that's the only way you're going to be stronger and survive this thing, she survives the dagger by the thing that is helping her hide her boobs, aka hide who she is. So I feel like even in that moment, they started to lose the theme of the movie and what the theme of this empowering scene should have been. Like, how about she gets saved by something that reminds her of who she truly is, instead of, oh, this thing's helping me hide. You know? Screenwriting, utilizing themes and metaphors, motifs. Even at the end of the movie, spoiler, she makes it back home, she lives. She gets back home and her sister, they add a sister character and they're doing the matchmaker kind of thing, and you know, she's more into it, but Mulan is like, hey, I'm Mulan, I don't want to do this. And I was thinking like, okay, when she comes back home at the end of the movie, things are going to change. People are going to recognize her strength and they're going to be empowered by her, and that's going to be special. Instead of just going by the established gender norms that actually make them feel less than. When she gets back home, the sister's just like, ayo, I got a husband and he's not scared of spiders, which is good enough for me. And it's like, and Mulan's just like, oh, I'm very proud of you. It's like, what? Do you not even know what you're trying to go for as far as like your message? Jesus Christ! The costumes and the sets look great. The guy playing Mulan's dad is good. There's a couple digital things that look alright. And the score is fine. Like, that composer, he does a good job with his other projects. Did a good job here. It definitely doesn't live up to the Jerry Goldsmith score of the original, though, if you want me to be petty and just compare this to the original. They did a much better job with that movie and with that story back then than now, with $200 million to make a live-action version. They got a lot of mileage out of those musical numbers. You got a lot of heavy-hitting emotional stuff in that, and you had a lot of great comedy. You had a lot of great voice actors that did a really great job selling you on the situation and selling you on these characters and genuinely making you have a good time. The action in that is much better. Oh my god, just watch the original. Disney will never learn, because recently they confirmed the Little Mermaid cast. You know, they're making their movie. They got a Peter Pan one coming up, and Pinocchio, starring Tom Hanks as Geppetto and Robert Zemeckis. Robert Zemeckis, who hasn't made a good movie in like 5 years, but continues to keep trying. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen The Witches, don't watch it. It's bad. Disney's just never gonna learn, no matter how many times that they get criticized like, hey, this didn't need to be made. It was okay, but the original is far superior. They don't care. They will keep making these remakes, even if they don't need to be remade, and wasting money on them just so they can make more money in return. I'm sick of it. I'm really sick of it. It's not the worst live-action Disney remake, but I prefer The Lion King, the one that was just a beat-for-beat rip on the original. You know, at least the visuals are all the way good in that, as opposed to this one. You know, the Aladdin one that I gave a lower grade to The Lion King, I'd much rather watch that one again than this. At least Will Smith, even though he's not Robin Williams, he's kind of fun. There's no fun in this. I'm gonna give Mulan a C-, despite the good things that this movie manages to squeak in. A lot of it is just dull and misguided, and I'm glad now that it's free, that you don't have to pay money for it, you know? Like, don't rent it on some other streaming service. Just watch it on Disney Plus for free if you really want to, you know, because it's not worth paying money for it. I'd rather them not get support for putting out some bullshit like this. But if you've seen Mulan, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.